Good afternoon. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Jess De Los Santos. Let's take a look at how the local bourse closed today, Friday. You have the rally extending for a second day here. Shares rose as much as 8%, but some sell-off ensued before close, muting down gains to just 0.3% to 7,055 over a 5-day period. The PSEI lost some 314 points after the 3.5% plunge on Wednesday. This recovery, however, that we're seeing for a second day, according to Tina Ulang of First Metro, is an opportunity to buy, knowing that the country's growth story is still intact. She told us this morning not to underestimate the threat of the Omicron variant, although the pickup in vaccination is going to temper risks of another slowdown in economic activity. Speaking of which, the entire country is now under alert level 2. More details on that later in the show. For now, Ulang says she's seeing that the sentiment-driven market is going to trade between 6,900 to 7,300 until year end. For today, however, you have SM Prime topping the leaderboard with a 3.2% gain. That's on the back of projections that operating profit could grow by 62% on recovery prospects. Globe not far behind with a 3.1% gain after it secured a 15 billion peso loan facility to fund its capex. 10 billion pesos will be coming from BDO, another 5 billion from Land Bank. Globe ends the session at 3,280. Security Bank also up to date. Moody's affirming its long-term deposit ratings for the lender at Baa2 with outlook remaining stable. On the flip side, however, JG Summit is a day's biggest drag, down 3.7%. ICTSI also in the red after JP Morgan reinstated it as overweight. Meralco also ending the day down even as it inked a deal with PEZA to streamline its power setup process for locators. Let's cap things off with a look at Union Bank, which reacted to a Philstar report that it already copped a $1 billion deal to acquire Citi's Philippine unit. Union Bank said that it's still in discussion with Citigroup and that no definitive agreement has been reached yet. Despite that, investors still bought UBP. The stock rose 9.4% to 97 pesos and 20 centavos a piece, its highest close yet on record. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The Securities and Exchange Commission is proposing a 2.6 billion peso digitalization program, which they aim to undergo over the next 5 years. SEC Chairman Emilio Aquino says the commission has launched initiatives to digitize its registration and filing processes. Now, the commission is seeking additional funding to fully implement these initiatives. Aquino said the SEC wants to use more technology for human resource management, online performance management, and records management, among others. The SEC also plans to create additional units to protect its systems from cyber attacks and data leaks. The commission has been setting up online processes as mobility restrictions limited in-person transactions. And the entire Philippines is now under alert level 2 as the government de-escalated the province of Apayao from alert level 3. The continued easing of coronavirus curves comes at a delicate time when local cases are declining while the Omicron variant spreads globally. On the plus side, around 8 million Filipinos were vaccinated during the government's 3-day vaccination drive. That's a million shy of the health department's 9 million target vaccinees, with some regions reporting vaccine wastage due to expiry. Meanwhile, the distribution of booster shots for fully vaccinated adults starts today. The vaccine expert panel said that the threat of the Omicron variant prompted an early rollout of booster shots for the general adult population. Dr. Nina Gloriani told The Big Story that the booster rollout was not supposed to start until December 10th. But with the Omicron variant posing a huge threat, the government opted to start the rollout ahead of schedule. Now, the Bangko Sentral has vowed to maintain an accommodative monetary policy to support the economy's recovery from the pandemic. BSP Governor Ben Jokno said the central bank would extend the current policy stance until needed by the national government. At the same time, Jokno downplayed the possible impact of the Omicron variant on the economy. He said the Banco Central is, quote, not so concerned about the new variant and that there's too much exaggeration about it. The Philippines has earlier joined a number of countries in tightening border restrictions following the detection of the Omicron variant overseas. The World Health Organization has also classified Omicron as a variant of concern. All right, uncertainty running high over fears of the Omicron variant, but our economy is overreacting, especially with no concrete data yet on the new variant. How much of a threat is Omicron to recovery, especially for the Philippines? To get his take, we have Stephen Cochrane, Chief Economist for Asia Pacific over at Moody's Analytics. Good afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon.
All right, thank you for joining us. You mentioned in your report that you expect that each wave of infections is going to be less disruptive than the previous one, and you expect that to be the case as well for the Omicron variant. But does this hold true as well for the Philippines?
Right. So, as we've looked at the economic forecast and looked at how we factor in future waves of Delta, we've had to make certain assumptions on that forecast because I think the important thing to note is that we know that there will be future waves, and we can see it, of course, now with Omicron creeping around the world right now. But we have to think that with each wave, the economic impact will be less than in the past for a couple of reasons. One, the story you mentioned about the vaccine rate rising in the Philippines, and this is critical. And we have seen that across the Asia Pacific region anyway, that there's been a real uptick, an elbow in the curve, if you will, in terms of the acceleration of vaccination. Second, that most countries have invested in their public health systems, that there's a greater capacity now to handle COVID patients, increased number of intensive care units or beds or isolation beds for COVID patients. And third, and here I think the Philippines is an example here again, is that governments are learning how to manage social distancing in a way that doesn't shut down the entire economy. And we can see this in the Philippines with its more highly focused plans for social distance measures rather than completely shutting down a city or the metro Manila area or the entire country. So as we learn, as we invest, and as we vaccinate, the impact of COVID should be less and less. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. That doesn't mean that the new waves of either existing variants or a new variant won't come along again. But that unless there is a really significant change that makes it difficult to deal with a certain variant, that the economic impact should be less.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned three factors. Among the three, of course, for sure, in terms of social distancing, that's where the Philippines at least has been very strict with. But when it comes to vaccination and the public health system, have we created enough defense against a possible entry of the Omicron variant?
Well, I do think that these are areas that the Philippines has to be really highly focused on, as really all countries in Southeast Asia. The vaccination rate in the Philippines still isn't at what some might consider, say, a level that would create what you might call herd resilience. And there is a ways to go in the Philippines to get the vaccination rate up to 80, 90%, up where some of the other countries in the region are. So the fact that the Philippines has these special vaccination programs, these couple of days where they're trying to really get the vaccine out, if this can be done over and over and over again, that would be good. The good thing is that the supply of vaccine doesn't seem to be so problematic. But as you mentioned actually earlier as well, that there's some vaccines are beginning to expire. That is becoming a bit of a problem as time passes, that those vaccines have to get out and into the arms of the population before they expire.
All right, that's of course a wasted opportunity to immunize the population. But looking at how a number of economies are reacting to the Omicron variant, a lot of them facing the risk head on with movement and travel curbs left and right. What's the downside to this?
Yeah, the downside is that a couple of downsides. One is that it may not stop Omicron anyway, and we can see that it is appearing in additional countries every day. As you pick up the newspaper, and there are more positive tests for Omicron that we see. But it is hopefully it's going to slow that process down anyway, and we do need 2, 3, 4 weeks or whatever for scientists and laboratories to get to understand better the peculiar characteristics of Omicron. In terms of the economic impact, right now, not so much because the manufacturing economy and the domestic economies are still going well, and particularly in Southeast Asia, where the Delta variant has the wave has passed. Domestic economies are opening up, as you mentioned, in the Philippines, and so people are getting out and shopping, buying goods, buying services. That's a very positive aspect still for the economy. The most immediate impact is, I think, on international travel and tourism, because even if Omicron turns out to be not so dangerous, say, right now, I think it may be slowing down the pace of recovery of travel. People who maybe had planned on traveling for the Christmas and New Year's holidays may
Mhm.
decide, no, this isn't the right time to do it, and hold back. And that means that it prolongs that rebound of the impact of improving travel and tourism on the economies. And we know that's important for the Philippines. That travel and tourism is a big part of the Philippine economy.
Exactly. I was about to ask that question, considering that much of our growth hinges on travel and tourism. How is that going to affect the country's growth prospects?
Well, it is one factor that will slow the economic recovery. In my outlook for the region, I've assumed that travel and tourism will be actually one of the last pieces of the economy to come back, even without Omicron. Just the barriers put in front of travelers in terms of getting pre-departure tests and pre-return tests, and even if there's a wait of a day or two to get those results, these are hurdles that many people would rather just not deal with and wait until travel conditions get a little better. But it is one factor that adds a little bit of, puts the brakes on economic recovery in the Philippines and around the world.
Okay, so safe to say, at least for now, we're not going to see any revisions or at least any effects on growth due to the Omicron variant. Well, of course, we have yet to wait on more detailed information on Omicron.
Well, I think that's a good way to think about it. Is that we've already in our expectations, our forecast for the rebound in terms of the economy in the Philippines, it's still a little bit slower than, say, what growth was pre-pandemic, and we
Mhm.
keep that forecast down a little bit simply because, again, we know that there will be these waves coming along. We just can't predict when. We don't know the severity, but they are going to come along, and there will be these bumps in the road that will add a little bit of friction to the pace of economic recovery. That uncertainty is something that we'll be living with for a while still.
All right, given that as well, what are growth prospects here for the Philippines for the full year 2021, and when do you see us returning to pre-pandemic growth?
So I should say the forecast for 2022, which is really the important point here, is about 6% growth for next year, and that's consistent with what we've been looking at over the last couple of months. Does growth accelerate to, say, the 7 to 8% that Philippines got used to prior to pre-pandemic? I don't think we'll see that in 2022. Again, I think the risks from additional waves are still there, but 2023, 2024, as investment returns to the Philippines, as those who have lost jobs get back into the labor market or create new small businesses and such, we should begin to see a little bit of an acceleration going forward. A lot of that, particularly a little longer term, is getting infrastructure projects up and running, completed, adding to the productivity growth that the Philippines really needs to get that growth rate accelerating as well.
Now, how is that growth rate fair compared to the rest of Southeast Asia?
Well, we've always had the Philippines actually at one of the fastest rates of growth in Southeast Asia, for a couple of reasons. One is that the potential rate of growth is stronger because the workforce is growing faster. Philippines has a young population, a high birth rate, and a fast growing labor force. Many other countries in Southeast Asia have very slow labor force growth, or in some cases actually nearly declining a labor force in coming years. So the Philippines has kind of a natural advantage in terms of its youth and its education level. Then what needs to follow, of course, is a very consistent pace of investment in both education and in infrastructure and in equipment and software, all the things that will help to improve productivity and launch the economy going forward.
All right, so lots in our arsenal to at least further propel growth. But then again, there's still the risk of the Omicron variant, but still so much things uncertain about it. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Again, Stephen Cochrane, Chief Asia Pacific Economist over at Moody's Analytics, speaking to us straight from Singapore. Thank you, Steve. Stay
Thank you.
safe. And those are the biggest stories of this trading day, December 3, 2021. Catch Business World Live again Monday next week at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jess De Los Santos, and we are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe. Philippines, have a great weekend.